Right, hello and welcome to day 5 of Ethical Brands for Fashion Revolution. Today we're discussing diversity in fashion. You've got Izzy hosting this one, so I'm going to bow out and just be in the background. Obviously, to everyone watching, you've got the comments box, so everyone on the panel, if you want to get your comments box on, then you can see what people are writing, and obviously we'll come back to any questions at the end. Yeah, and so enjoy the panel. See you all later.
Hello, everyone. We seem to have lost someone temporarily. So today is about diversity of fashion, but we're going to talk specifically about the sustainable and ethical fashion because that's what everyone's focus here. So if we could just start, any questions you have throughout, just ask them and I'll pick up any questions we have in the comments box. And if people could just start by introducing themselves. I'm Izzy. I run the Sustainable Living blog, The Quirky Environmentalist. I'm also an environmental activist. And if everyone on the panel would like to introduce themselves.
Who would you like to start?
You can start, Alice, as you.
Hi, I'm Alice. I have a brand called Little Black Pants Club, and I'm also studying a master's in design for the Cultural Commons, which is looking at kind of alternative business models, horizontal governance structures, stuff like that.
Camila?
Shall I go next?
Yeah.
My name's Fritha. I am the CEO of a ethical business, social business called Secret Projects. We are a kind of ethical multinational. We've just become a community benefit society, and we drive female-led micro enterprise in India through the making and selling of clothing and homeware.
Wonderful. And hopefully we'll get Camila back in a second so that she can introduce herself, as she's been having some trouble with the audio.
It's so difficult online.
Yeah, are you there? Can you hear us?
Oh, looks like you can't.
Can you hear us, Camilla?
Give it
otherwise, just to so that it doesn't hold up too much, when she's back, maybe sort of introduce her then. Otherwise I just sort of carry on.
Yeah, so first of all, first question was going to be, I think it's a pretty obvious one, but you can expand on what the issues are. Is there a diversity issue within the sustainable and ethical fashion world?
It's such a shame because I think Camila is probably the most relevant person to speak on this. So it's tricky. I think the thing is there's a systemic problem with diversity and like institutional racism and lack of representation in the whole of society. So it would be ridiculous to think that that wasn't present within commerce and fashion and even sustainable fashion. I think it's something we've all got to be just really switched on to and really listening hard and making an effort to make changes wherever we can, but also just it's a big campaign issue and it's something that we can't expect to kind of take credit for its existence or be the ones to completely solve it. So it's a brands to be making an effort politically, not just business model wise or in their own kind of little spheres.
Can you hear us now?
Yes. I had to go all the way back out. Yeah.
Good. Could you introduce yourself then, please?
Yes, so I am Camila Sanders, and I'm based out of the United States. I have my own consulting firm. It's called Greater Than Equal, and we do international consulting, mainly like marketing and communications for social impact organizations, mainly art organizations or fashion, sustainable fashion focused organizations. And I will say that I have lived sustainable fashion my entire life. I mean, I grew up where a lower income family where we were constantly thrifting My mother was a seamstress. She made our clothes. I had three older sisters, and we did hand-me-down. So has been like a way of life for me. My mom constantly talked about, fabrics, the quality of fabrics. We always had Vogue magazine in our house. So from there, I went on to working in retail fashion apparel for about 15 years. And then I moved to doing marketing for about 20 years for nonprofit and international organizations. So now, like I said, I'm doing a consulting business, and it really, trying to make a change in the world.
Yeah, so the first question, which you just missed, is, well, the obvious, I think with an obvious answer, but is there a diversity issue within the sustainable and ethical fashion world?
There definitely is in fashion in general, but also in sustainable fashion. I think, and I don't know if you already said this, but I think that we really need to take a look at diversity and what that means, because it really means different things for different people. Like for me, the first thing I might think of is race, but for some people, it might be the size, like what size do you wear, or it might be income level. So, there's definitely different types of diversity, but when I talk about diversity, I'm talking about, across the board, whether it's gender or size or income.
Do you have anything to add to that one, Britta?
Well, I'm a lecturer at the London College of Fashion, and I've just done, in January, I did my lecture, which is all about how to pitch and enterprise and how to make money out of something out of nothing kind of thing. And in terms of race, the students in my cohort, there was a huge diversity, and every single one of them, sustainable fashion was at the core of their pitch at the end of the course. So that really gave me hope for the future.
So the next question, which I think has slightly been answered, is like, what would you say is your biggest issue, like, or your focus in terms of diversity? Because as Camilla said, it means different things to different people. Alice?
So my business model is based around offering sizing diversity, and that's really a kind of founding principle of why we operate the way we do, particularly in underwear. I think, well, I don't know, all of this stuff goes a lot deeper for me, because it's an issue with mass production, as far as I'm concerned. That mass production can't facilitate the diversity that exists within humanity. So when you're if you're going to go for a traditional fashion model where you're going to buy from factories and you're going to have things producing quantities of 35 per SKU plus, you already got issues with what you can offer into the marketplace. So really, I'm really interested in localism and in the opportunity to offer bespoke, because I just think that speaks to diversity at a much deeper level than trying to tap a particular community or trying to offer an expanded sizing range. This is talking about the uniqueness of every human and the ability to make clothing for those humans as unique individuals, and so that's really where I kind of focus, and it also allows for a lot of dialogue and a lot of listening about what people's needs really are on a very personal level.
I think from our point of view with working in India, and it's also Who Made My Clothes Week and Fashion Revolution, one of the things that we're really focusing on as a business, as a global business, is empowering our makers and other members of our team to have more of a voice. So it was so ironic today when I was reading the questions about coming on this panel. I thought, wow, my business partner in India, Nimala, would be so much more appropriate for this conversation. And had we not been in lockdown, and we wouldn't be doing it like we are. But it made me think how important it is for me to work with her on her biog and her pics, and to make sure that when an opportunity like this arises, I don't think, right, I'll do it. I automatically think, okay, I'll do it. I should be thinking, no, let's get Nimala on, because she'd be way more interesting than me right now. So I can take a step back, yay, and everyone else can do more of this kind of stuff, and it would mean that you'd see a completely different side to Secret Projects, the real side.
Yeah. Yeah, I must admit, when I saw the panel, I sort of took a step back, but it was only a week before, so I was like, oh, I have so many ideas for people who may be better than me to put forward for this panel, but it's so last minute, so I'm going to do what we've got. Yeah. Camila, did you have any thoughts on?
Yeah, so I think the biggest issue is really transparency, and that is really somewhat my focus, because we need to understand like what these brands are doing and where things come from. And my focus, and I think the biggest way to make an impact, is to amplify those people's voices, where, you know, it's in any diverse audience, and then also, you know, who is making your clothes, and really having people understand what is happening in the supply chain and things like that, things that are really important. So having that transparency is important, and that's kind of the focus, is amplifying people's voices and creating additional transparency or more transparency, so that people know when they make these buying decisions that they can make an impact in the world where they're impacting other people.
Definitely. I've got two questions that sort of link up from the audience, and one was someone was running a sewing group called Guys and Stitches, but they so far haven't been able to get men interested in sewing. And then there was another one, Smee, saying that women are more interested in sustainability and environment than men, or I might be wrong. So what do you think? Because it definitely seems that the sustainability movement is women-led. So is there a way to get more men involved? Is it that more women are interested? What's the issue there, I suppose?
It's hard for me to talk about this because my business is totally focused on empowering women. So come on, the men, love it. We should be, I suppose there are men within Secret Projects doing amazing things. And again, part of that, giving people within Secret Projects a voice going forward, they are people I would love to empower to speak more and to show what a huge role they're playing in the delivery of sustainable fashion and homeware.
Yeah, I think women are key to the movement. If you think about women as wage earners and how they bring that income back to their family, so I think that they're really key for the movement. And just, you know, I think the way that we think is a lot different than men. So I think it's important. I do think that there probably are a lot of ways, you know, like you said, there's men that are, you know, in the movement, and they're talking, and they're, you know, they're thinking about these things. But I think for that, you may have to come from a different angle, maybe a more, you know, practical angle, and, you know, have more things available. We have a lot available for us. We have a lot of options for us, for women in clothing in general, but, you know, just bring forth those options for men that are more, you know, practical. Like you talk about wool clothing and how it doesn't wrinkle, how it biodegrades, like things like that, you know, and you know, I mean, just to bring it back to diversity, I mean, that's a whole nother perspective too. Are we incorporating enough males, and do they have a voice as far as like, you know, on the runway or within these brands, you know, what is their voice, you know? So it goes back to diversity too, you know?
I think you've got a couple of big names that are male-led in sustainable fashion. Christopher Rayburn, obviously, being one of the kind of forerunners of and sort of poster boy of sustainable fashion. And then male. I feel like, I think the sewing group thing, for me, that touches on masculinity as a kind of meta narrative that sort of underpins the way our economic system works. And I wonder, there's something about kind of the growth narrative that I think is slightly easier for women. I think we already see the issues with this kind of profit-driven perpetual growth economic system because of the way it has traditionally been used to erase women, to erase plus size women, to create a kind of market based on not feeling good about yourself, the beauty industry being a massive player in that. So I think women already see the issues clearly because a lot of the kind of more negative effects of the fashion industry are directed at us, and maybe that accounts for some of the kind of greater numbers of women working in this kind of ethical space.
And of course, like the majority of garment workers are women, so it's sort of, I guess, about women empowering women in the movement.
I think there is a massive thing about
massively.
I think there's a massive thing about educating boys at a young age about sewing, because sewing is a deeply technical skill, cutting, all those kind of things. So I think we should just be, I mean, I know how to sew because I grew up with the soundtrack of a sewing machine. We never had a family meal without having the sewing machine as the fifth member of the family. You know, you always had to clear away the sewing to eat. And I think that, okay, why does my brother not sew? He's just not, he's a lawyer, a criminal aid lawyer. He can read and write much better than I can. So he went down that route and I went down this route. But I know so many little boys who, I'm a foster mum, and when they see the sewing machine going, they are there. They want to learn how to make something, and so it's making sure that they see that as a skill that they can continue, and it's not a girly thing. It's it's deeply technical, and people who can stitch are completely amazing. And as stitchers, we need to be more like proud and tell people, yeah, it's amazing if you can make a pair of trousers, because it's not easy. And particularly an amazing pair of trousers someone's going to wear again and again and again.
I think that's a huge thing for the whole ethical, sustainable, regenerative movement as a whole, is really bringing the skills to the front of it and putting much more pride and joy back into the use of those skills and the understanding of those skills. Because I think it's something that does make it a bit difficult to have true diversity throughout these sustainable brands. Is there is a skills lack. And that's not relating to any particular echelon or kind of strata of society. There just is a skills lack across the board. And also, if you think about slow food movement, a lot of what makes that viable and possible is that people do a lot of the cooking themselves. And so I think that's something we have to start to embrace more as an industry, is understanding that DIY will be a huge part of making fashion and clothing truly a sustainable and a regenerative practice into the future, because otherwise you're looking at huge costs. And something that's a big part of diversity is definitely the affordability narrative, and we need to find really sneaky, clever ways to get around that and not always be looking at a kind of ethical luxury sector, because that's obviously it's not going to deal with the huge amounts of waste that's produced through the fast fashion brands, and B, it's not going to be able to provide for massive parts of the population in the kind of economic system that we have now. But a real understanding of DIY and a better engagement with domestic making practice and making in the home is a way. I think Fibershed are brilliant for the way they've kind of managed to marry the regenerative agriculture back to the local artisanal skills side of things as well. And I think that's going to be really important. Even just understanding price at a kind of less superficial level, having tried to make something yourself does give you a much better indication of why things cost what they do, and why fast fashion can't possibly cost what it does without doing quite a lot of negative causing quite a lot of misery in the global south.
Definitely. I think that leads quite well onto our next question on how can brands themselves, because a lot of brands could do a lot better when it comes to diversity, both in terms of race, in terms of size, in terms of making sure they're accessible. So what can brands do to do better in those areas?
The main thing is it's not necessarily, putting a model out there, or it's not just in their advertising. It has to be something that's ingrained in the brand. They have to have people in positions, not just the diversity and inclusion person that doesn't have a voice, but someone that, they actually give a voice to, and they integrate and purposely integrate these voices and listen to them within the organization. I think that's really the only way to do it, because otherwise you're just putting a Band-Aid on the issue and it's not authentic. Whereas if you have someone that looks different in every single different way, then they can actually say, okay, well, and going back to the affordability.
Oh, that's sad.
What happened there?
No, we need to know this bit.
I know. She was on a roll.
We had this before on one of the other panels, and I feel like there's something in the internet that
just
sort of
as
gets
soon as
people,
someone's
just
about
Just
to
to
give
say
the
getting to
crucial
a
bit of
amazing point.
information.
Yeah. So I apologise to the
that.
audience. Hopefully Camilla will join us back.
I'm really into horizontal governance. I think the problem is that it can seem from the outside that a lot of that sustainable fashion brands are big groups, but actually, as far as I know, a lot of them are micro entities. A lot of them are 2 or 3 people. And so with the diversity, it's almost like you want to empower groups of 2 or 3 people to come up through marginalized communities. And I think that is about the kind of skills gap being bridged. And I think skills should be taught in schools. I'm absolutely with the other panelists who
It's such a weird name. Fritha, it's so weird. Just
Fritha. Thank you, Fritha. I'm absolutely with Fritha on that. I think we should start coming together as brands to campaign for better education on skills, like all the skills, but especially I love sewing, so I think it should be definitely done in schools, definitely part of further education, much more apprenticeships. But that all requires, it either requires people to invest more in their clothes, and that requires rent cap, and I don't see another way of making that possible without cost of living, cost of housing in particular, coming down quite substantially. And I think that becomes quite a political debate, but I really want to see the ethical fashion community start to get their teeth into that, because we're swimming upstream as long as we try and exist in a world where people spend 60% of their income on their housing. Like, it's ridiculous. And this is something that no one had to make a lot of the time. And I think the more we can flip that narrative and talk a lot more about, well, why can't people afford to pay for things that have been made just properly? It shouldn't be anything like extravagant to be buying an item that doesn't poison the earth and cause someone to live in what is essentially slavery just for it to exist. That shouldn't be this sort of crazy countercultural situation. But it will be, as long as we allow landowners to basically suck huge amounts of money out of the economy so that they can't flow to these other parts of our like essential well-being. Clothing is part of that. I think I went off on a weird tangent, sorry.
It was definitely a tangent about accessibility, which is important when it comes to diversity. So
for me, I think one of the things that we're trying to do loads more of is empower the makers, but also empower the customers. Like, the customer is the powerful person, right? Vote with your pounds, vote with your dollars, vote with whatever currency you have. If the customers want something, the businesses will listen, and the governments will listen to the businesses, right? So I think we should be saying to the customers, and they already are doing it. Like, look at these, plus size women are just like amazing. There's so much going on in that debate. The men, all sorts of different people are entering the fashion world. Like, you know, also there's so many sustainable fashion is saying, oh, by the way, there aren't 25 trendy seasons a year anymore. There's just one season, and that's do what the fuck you like. And it's that's great. You know, everyone walks down the street looking completely different from the next person, and no one's saying, oh, that's awesome. You know, so I think that with things like Pinterest and YouTube and all these things that we didn't have, that weren't huge 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, are going to change things massively. And and things like Who Made My Clothes and Fashion Revolution is putting power into the consumer's hands, and that will drive the bigger brands to adapt and things like that. However, we can't just rely on the customers, and we can't just, you know, encourage them. We can't just empower them. We've also got to do the bigger stuff that we've also talked about on this session. But definitely it's the people, the exhausted people like us that run these small, ethical, sustainable fashion brands. We need to gather the masses and keep doing it, and give them more things to do to make proper change, and teach them how to sew.
Do you think that's something that can be done by brands as well, though, and have it more accessible on the internet?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah,
We could be saying, oh, by the way, you know, I make secret pillows, and after lots and lots of use, there's 2 pieces on the edge of the side of the pillow that always comes undone, and it's just wear and tear, and there's nothing you can do unless you go and put some weird plastic bit in there, and I don't want to do that. But actually, we should be saying to people, don't send it back so I can sit there on my industrial and fix it for you. This is how you fix it, and you do hand stitching and sewing stitching. It's not all about having a sewing machine. It's about having a pair of scissors and a needle and thread. So much can be done.
Yeah, and I think fast fashion brands are not going to want to encourage their consumers to fix their own items, because then they'll buy less. Oh, she's back.
Hi.
Can you hear us? I could see you trying to get in and out of the session.
Are you there?
I'm here.
Yeah.
I just can't hear you though.
Hey.
Oh.
I can hear someone.
Is it Alice again?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me?
Well, if I
can.
sort of talk through Alice.
I can't hear anyone else though.
Yeah, I can translate. Yeah.
So if Camila
Ask me
wanted
a
to get
question,
back
I'll
to the
answer.
point that she was making earlier, as she was on a roll.
Oh yeah, you were just about to tell us something really fascinating about affordability. Do you remember where you were going? We all want to know.
I think I was going to say, you know, when we talk about diversifying brands, if someone comes in there and they're not used to having a certain income level, I'm going to come from the perspective of, oh, I used to not be able to afford things because I was younger. You know, I'm younger, I can't afford it, or my family doesn't make as much money, so I can't afford it. So I'm going to think from a different lens. And if you want to really have a mission and stand for something as a brand, then I'm going to say, oh, you know, I'm going to come up with a creative way to get our brand into the hands of people that don't have as much money, just because I've been in that perspective before. So maybe it's like a creative program where, oh, let's have people give their clothes back, and then we resell it at a lower price, or there's so many creative things that can come from a diverse employees. So just bring in that perspective from the organization to get creative.
Yeah, I think I that's something that I love about horizontal governance, is that you're not putting extra work for yourself, you're getting extra ideas. And I think it is really fascinating to see as diversity starts to filter through in academia, in the sort of the management structures of companies, how that actually just naturally changes the companies. Because I think people don't realize that for so long, anyone writing philosophy, anyone making science, anyone kind of acting at the higher level of the ideology that underpins in a quite subconscious way the way that we live, it has all come from a particular group of people, and they have done so well at erasing the experience of other people. And it's when you start to read text on aesthetics even, or something that feels quite innocuous, the pomposity, the ridiculous, like, it's basically a lot of academia is just an excuse for someone to tell you why you have to put your own opinion aside and just listen to what they think. And they have like theorized that for centuries now. And so I think just even as people start to come through, things are changing and shifting just from the presence of a wider range of experiences, and making the space to hear those experiences and to act on them is really valuable for your brand and for brand resilience, for like community resilience, for all of those things. So it's an exciting space to be part of.
Yeah, I think for me, from coaching loads of young people who want to start their own ethical fashion brands and things like that, or want to get into sustainable fashion, and working at London College of Fashion, and being a passionate seller. I love selling stuff, and I truly believe that and I'm not into mass fashion, definitely not. But I do believe that that we should help people be successful in this space. There are loads of people that want to come up and do stuff in ethical fashion and sustainable fashion, and who are very diverse. And what I need to do, my personal mission, is to make sure that they are turning their ideas into entrepreneurial activities, and where they're creating social economic value in what they're coming up with, and they're starting those crowdfunding campaigns, and they're successfully bringing those their first collections, making it successful, and then they're making money out of it. And even if it's just a side hustle at first, that's fine. Then we just help them be more and more successful, because if they're successful, then this becomes more successful. And selling is totally key to everything that we do. We've got to transact. We've got to have transactions going all the time, because that makes us also successful. And brings up those newbies on board, which will make us more diverse and way better and all the rest of it, and more powerful and more exciting.
I think we touched on it a little bit before, but how can then, we've talked about brands, but how can consumers help to make things more diverse and uplift marginalized voices? What are we looking for in brands when we're supporting those brands? I still don't know if Camilla can hear me, so if Alice, you could translate.
Camilla, so the question is, what can consumers be doing to allow a more diverse range of brands to come through, and brands that are led by diverse people from diverse backgrounds? How can consumers kind of make that happen, make those brands come through?
Well, I think that consumers can really start to ask questions and demand transparency. Like, I want to know where these clothes came from. I want to know who are your designers? What does your brand stand for? And you're not just trying to sell me clothes. I think, consumers want to know, what this brand is about. Especially with all the noise out there, they're demanding more. And I think that that's what they have to do. They have to ask questions. They have to demand transparency. And I think consumers can see if a brand is being authentic when it comes to diversity. And so, support those brands that you can see that are authentic and that are, being sustainable in an authentic way, and that are being transparent. So that's where you put your money. And then also to amplify the message. So if you got something from a thrift shop, or you created your own clothes and you sewed your own clothes, or if you supported a certain brand, say that, post a picture on social media and say, this is what I did and this is why I did it, because I think every consumer has an exponential power to reach a ton of other people. So just being a voice and standing for something.
Yeah, I think the ethical fashion and sustainable fashion world, we also need to be really welcoming to consumers who maybe don't see themselves as part of our world, or who maybe see themselves a little bit as part of our world. And I think one of the ways we need to be careful is fast fashion bashing is really, really negative, because if for people who aren't in, who are thinking about crossing the divide or dipping in and out. Now, I'm totally anti-human slavery and all the rest of it, but I know so many friends who will say, I say, oh, that's a beautiful dress. Where's it from? And they say, from Zara. And they say, I'm so sorry. And I say, don't panic. Do not panic. It's great. It's a beautiful dress. And then it's about being open. And they say, where's your dress from? Or what are you wearing? And then to be welcoming into that conversation, and to be encouraging all the time, and to also support them and enable them to actually shop with the ethical and sustainable brands, and to make sure that we're presenting this sector as something that's on trend and fun and beautiful and cool, and not sort of angry and cross. If I can say all of that without having a go at us. Do you know what I mean? Just to be a little bit more, yay, cool, let's go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it can feel difficult sometimes. You've got group of people who buy from fast fashion brands because they have no other economic choice. And then you've got people who've got loads of resources and appear to be acting in a way that's just not caring. And I think it's difficult to calm yourself, calm your mind, and come with those feelings of care towards both of those groups. And fast fashion bashing, it's really important to hold brands accountable. It's really important to be honest and truthful about what the existence that clothing really means. But it has to be done in a way that has as much care for the consumer, or consumer is such a horrible word, has as much care for the person wearing the clothes as it does for the people that are making those clothes. But I think also that message can be difficult to hear if you identify more with groups who would traditionally be global south garment workers. And I think that's something that we have to be really sensitive about as well, because it is real misery. It's a real miserable state of affairs. And maybe again, it, like Camilla was saying about amplifying the voices and just allowing those voices from those unions, from people who knew someone who was injured or died in Rana Plaza, just amplifying those voices is the most sensitive and caring way of allowing the truth to be told, but without this element of bashing, like you're saying, or without just inflicting guilt onto people that then ends up not being helpful.
Yeah, and onto people who we really need to inspire to come and help us. We really need lots more people to be moving and looking towards our sector and helping us and invest and buying things from it, in order for us to then use that money to invest in the future. We've got to get bigger and more powerful quickly, and I mean bigger and more powerful in a soft and nice way. So we have to, and we need people to divert their resources towards us. Yeah,
I wonder if there's a space for allowing that anger to bubble up, because actually people have been lied to, and that's the simple fact of it, is those brands who act in that way are not honest or transparent about how it's possible to make a dress for £10.50. And the myth is that it's possible in a way that is just like, oh, technology, or like some kind of machine that can just knit it together out of rubble off the street. Like that exists. And that lie, oh, I've got myself on some weird feedback. Did anyone hear that?
You're
okay,
fine now. It was only for a second.
Okay, I think that lie really exists, and I think allowing that rage, that you're being lied to, you're being made complicit in someone else's slavery, allowing that to kind of bubble up in a healthy way to come to the fore, that, I feel like politically that has to happen across many sectors. This isn't an inert system. This is an economic system with powerful players who are keeping it going in order to enrich themselves. And for me, I don't know, but that I find that it's a really important space to allow, and to allow, especially to allow Indigenous cultures to start to feel that rage and start to express that anger at how things are playing out at the moment.
Definitely.
I want to know what Camilla thinks of that, though. Definitely.
Have we lost Camilla again, or?
Can you hear us, Camilla?
No. Has she gone again?
No.
Oh, no.
I can't hear her either. Can anyone hear her? No.
Of course, just as we were getting again to a point.
Yeah.
Gone again. That's such a shame.
I know. And my next question towards the end was about how, well, we can start it off again. Camilla's probably the best person to talk on this. Is sustainable and ethical fashion is definitely seen as an industry that is made by, in terms of brand owners, and made for middle class white women, which I think bars a lot of people who aren't in that group from thinking that it's for them. So how do we change that perception and encourage more people to think that this is for them and they are a part of this movement as well?
As a middle white woman.
I get the impression
Yeah,
that
I know.
I get the impression that a lot of that comes down to the aesthetics of it. And I don't think there's any problem with that. Like, white middle class women are making fashion for themselves. I don't really count myself in that group, but I know it's not really for me to say. So I think the best way, I would say, is to get the resources, exactly like Fritha's been doing through LCF, the resources to the other groups who are just going to bring their communities along with them. And I think we will see that as long as the economy doesn't just completely tank now and everyone sort of goes back to drinking vodka around a beer now, but it is coming through. And the more I guess making space is really important. And so brands that have a big following, if they feel that they are guilty of being a kind of white middle class bubble, maybe they should be making space for other designers to kind of piggyback off of their followings and off of their access to kind of, I don't know, wealthier customers, or that might be one space. But really, I think the fairest and the most dignified way is to just start to give whatever knowledge we can about how we've made something work to designers from diverse backgrounds, and just start to see them come through and start to see them provide for their communities. Because at the end of the day, if you're a profit-making company and you think, oh, well, I'm not going to appeal to white middle class women, I'm going to appeal to another group, it can look a little bit like an extraction if you're just going to be making profit off the back of another group, especially if you're making profit on the basis of, and we're doing a really great thing. So if you're kind of appealing to people, their cultural capital and their cultural equity and their aesthetic, that may be not ideal. Whereas if you allow them to create these sustainable economic models where the money goes within their community, like, to me, that's really the essence of diversity, is that the money goes round and round within communities. It's not getting shuffled off into Panama or someone else's pocket.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry, it's just
that was so good. I don't know what to say now, so I have nothing left to say. I agree. Yeah.
And then my last
And
point.
also, we should remember that. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
That traditionally, fashion brands were owned by aristocracy. So even if it's gone from being like aristocratic ownership of fashion to middle class, that's still a step down. You know, sorry, down isn't right, but that's still a stepping stone towards whatever other class and diversity criteria you might want to start owning fashion. So we should still see that middle class white women having brands is a resistance in its way. It is a resistance against them all just being owned by really posh rich people. So, you know, maybe that's, we can see this as a transition, not just a kind of negative end point.
Can you hear us now? Yay! Let's hope this
Sorry, I
one
don't
lasts.
know. All right.
This question was, as the perception of sustainable and ethical fashion tends to be seen as by brand owners and for middle class women sort of predominantly. So how do we change perceptions and sort of open up this world to people who aren't just middle class white women?
Well, I think, I mean, that's definitely true. And, you know, it does go back to what I said before about having people in the organization that think differently to be able to market to those people. I do think, you know, it's you know, goes back to economic diversity. You know, a lot of times you're only going to see through one lens if that's all that company is looking for. And so that's who they market to. But I think it's also, and that's, you know, that's one segment, and that's fine. And a lot of people that are younger are like, well, I can't afford that. You know, how can I participate? And it's really communicating that message that, well, you can participate by being a voice, or you can participate by making your own clothes, learning how to sew. You can participate by going to thrift stores. You can participate by, you know, not putting your clothes in a trash bag and actually, you know, giving them to people that might need them, or fixing your clothes. So there's so many different ways that you can participate, and I think that a lot of people, they want to. So it's having that brand find a way to say, hey, this, communicating that message to everyone that this having sustainable fashion, it is accessible. You know, you can do it, but you do it in your own way. You know, so I think it's just communicating that. It just looks different for different people.
Absolutely, yeah. I just want to say something about ownership. Like, I'm a middle class white woman, and I did own my business for 5 years, but then I've recently sold it to 260 investors. So I now don't own my company. So again, that's another. It's about looking at different ways of financing the things that we're doing, and yeah, just as Camilla said, it's about, there are loads and loads of people who probably don't even see themselves. Like when I was selling the shares, I was saying to people, you probably don't even see yourself as a potential investor, because they never even thought of themselves as an investor, because it's something that somebody else does who's got more money than them, or who's got a different outlook on the world or whatever. But actually, by positively labeling them, they were able to see that they were a global change maker in the ethical fashion industry. And that's amazing. They didn't think of themselves before that, until I said, okay, buy some shares, and now this is your cool, brilliant label. Just as people like my dad, he never buys clothes. Yay, he's one of these sustainable fashion people. He does not look like a sustainable fashion person. He's a disaster fashion-wise, but he's totally sustainable, ethical, will never buy clothes again until he dies. Go my dad.
And I guess there's also sort of a lot of companies now, ethical companies, are moving towards people who make the clothes having shares in the company as well, to give them ownership of the brand. And I guess that's also a way of empowering the people who make the clothes as having part of the business.
But it's so, it is so hard. The finance world is nothing, there's nothing global about it. It's all about countries, different banking systems, different laws, different tax regulations, you know, and you know, people like, I can sew and I can sell stuff, but I've had to work with some serious minds to make this community benefit society, this ethical multinational which we have created, work. And it's not for everyone going through the intense stress that we've had to go through. And the step where we get our makers involved, that's a whole nother 2-year process of deep stress and anxiety and money and all the rest of it. And we're damn well going to do it. But we are trailblazing pioneers. Let's not forget that, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also showing.
Also, I think.
Sorry, carry on.
No, sorry, Izzy, go on.
Oh, I was just saying that showing your consumers.
Just that,
Oh. I think there's a bit of a delay. Showing your consumers as well that that is something you're working towards, and that's hard, allows them to see, okay, this is what fashion looks like.
Yeah,
that's all I wanted to say there. Alice.
Yeah. I was going to say that something I've been working on is a kind of bootstrap model that doesn't require necessarily access to big resources to start up. And I think bringing those kind of more sneaky, there's something about breaking down the glamour of having a fashion brand, and which in a traditional sense requires huge amounts of money to even get it off the ground, and empowering people to think as creatively about their business model as they would think about the clothing that they're going to design. And I think it's really right what Frida's saying about just going for economic sustainability really early on, and not a lot of it, when people are learning about fashion, a lot of it is related to needing to have big chunks of money to invest in your kind of launch, for instance. But actually the tech world is not interested in that way of working anymore, and there's a lot we can learn from those kind of successful industries where bootstrapping and lean startup especially are two big idea banks that I'd really recommend to someone who wants to have a fashion brand, because it's a different way of thinking about building a brand that does allow people to come through with very limited resources from the beginning. And I think I'm really interested in sharing the data that we've kind of accumulated and the sort of tests that we've run working on that. So if anyone wants to be starting something and they want to know about it, then they're welcome to get in touch and we'll put something together.
Great.
And then sort of the final thing, closing thoughts as well, is looking at what you want a diverse fashion future in ethical and sustainable fashion to look like. Like, what does that look like to you?
So for me, it's a world where everyone is connected, and it's transparent. People know that when they make a decision, when they buy something, they know what impact it has on someone all the way across the globe, or maybe even just if they're buying local, they know that this is, I purchased this and this is from a local designer. It didn't go through and, a bunch of different channels. So I purchased this from an ethical company. So it's transparent. People know that they are connected in the world, and I think we're starting to see this now, especially in these times. But just that people, they can make these conscious buying decisions, these conscious decisions about what they do, because they know the impact that it has. I picture a connected world.
Mine is like a kind of gothic peasant future of small scale community ownership, a load of like anarcho-syndicalism, people just like chopping stuff up, making new stuff that I guess it's quite steampunk, like a lot of small scale machinery that you can operate by hand or it's water powered, people living on the land. You grow your vegetables in the morning, you get on and you spin something on some weird contraption you've made, and you make yourself a shirt in the afternoon. So it's a kind of whole new community lifestyle shift, but maybe I never see it. Maybe it's something my grandchildren are involved in.
I think for me, it's just mainstream. Like, we forget the terms ethical and sustainable fashion, and we go back to talking about fashion. And it's just all of that is now then mainstream, and that's it's good. But mainstream for me.
Does anyone have any final thoughts to add?
No, interesting stuff.
I think there's space for all of it. I think it's really nice for like even just that diverse range of ideas that's come through just from the three of us imagining the future. Like, there should be space for all of it, and I think just getting rid of this political stranglehold that makes only one way of operating kind of possible is going to be really crucial just for everyone with any creative idea going forward.
Definitely.
I think my last words would just be that, anyone watching, that you have a voice, and you can affect, a number of different people by your actions and everything that you do and the things that you say. And that's for every single individual person. So, just stand for something and amplify your voice, find that thing that you stand for, and, go that path.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much, ladies. That was very inspiring stuff. I think it's a great topic that can kind of span very different things, like Kelsey was saying, for sort of different people, whether it be sort of race, age, sort of money, and kind of or even like sort of political awareness and things like that. It kind of everyone sort of has different views on things. And I think sort of ethical fashion should be able to open up and sort of apply to everyone and anyone, really. So thank you very much. I think there was one question at the bottom but I think we sort of covered that, really, about Bettina was saying that she's just doing her thesis on diversity and sustainable fashion. And she says, what are brands to do to elevate ethics and sustainability to be in equal measures? If anyone wants to answer that. Oh, can you all hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, right.
Well, in my opinion, I think I said this, but just being able to be transparent, go back to integrating that voice, that diverse voice in all different facets, whether it's race, gender, economic, and integrating that into the organization. I think, that's what they can do, and really going and listening to the consumer and what the consumer wants, and allowing and amplifying the voice of, those groups that are disadvantaged and are in the supply chain. I mean, it's really going to take a whole different mentality from the brand. And I think the next generations that are coming up, that's what's really going to bring that. It's going to take a lot of, change.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's sort of, it's about us as sort of brand owners to think beyond ourselves as such.
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous. Well, if no one's got anything else to say, we will end the session. Thank you very much for everyone for speaking on it. It's been great to see you all virtually if we can't meet in person. And obviously thank you to everyone for watching, and thank you very much for your comments. See you later. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
That's all right. You too. Bye. Oh, fabulous. Right, so thank you very much for watching that, and I hope you got a lot of valuable information from it. I'll just make sure that there haven't been any other comments. That's cool. Yeah, so obviously we're on day 5 about say 7-day virtual event. Next is at 4 o'clock. We've got big brands, their focus on the ethical market. I'll be hosting that one, so I will see you back for then. And obviously, those of you that haven't got your ticket, we have got the tickets for the swap shop that's going live tomorrow, so do grab your ticket for that. Thank you. Bye.